everyone. I must say at the start that I consider it a great privilege to be sort of given this opportunity to chair this session. I've known Kuntala for quite many years, and I've always followed her work with great care. And nevertheless, there's always a complication when you're friendly with someone you don't really study them as seriously as you should. So today I went to the internet and decided to download Professor Kuntala's CV, and then I suddenly realized I cannot subject my printer to so much pressure. There's a tremendous number of publications, and I went about deleting reports, book reviews, conference papers, forthcoming books, and I still ended up with a very substantial collection. And so then I knocked out the articles, then I knocked out even non-refereed publications, and somehow I put together a reasonably short CV, given that I cannot speak more than the presenter. So I'm just going to quickly rehearse some of her achievements and contributions, but there I should emphasize in the word some because it's a very long list. Kuntala was trained in human geography at the Calcutta University in India and taught in Burdwan University before joining Australian National University in 2002. She manages the Environment and Resource Management graduate study field of research at present and convenes the gender specialization in the Masters in Applied Anthropology and Participatory Development. In addition, Kuntala teaches courses on exploring gender and development in the first semester every year. Her research interests are fairly voluminous: women, gender, and development, and this includes environmental sustainability, water, mining, and there's even a book here on which I'm the proud owner of a copy on rickshaws in Bengal. Bangladesh, I'm sorry. Greater Bengal. Her books would be, of course, today Dancing with the River, that recently came out from Yale University Press. 2013, there's a second book coming out this year, Rethinking Displacement, Asia Pacific Perspectives. This is with Grace Ganguly and Ruchira. There's another book from 2013 here, The Coal Nation, Histories, Cultures, and Ecologies of Coal in India, Aldershot, Ashgate, 2013. Then we have edited Gendering the Field Towards Sustainable Livelihoods for Mining Communities. That's 2011. A second book in 2011, edited Saraswati Raju and Kuntala Lahiri, Doing Gender, Doing Geography, Emerging Research in India. 2010, a book called Moving Pictures on Rickshaw Art of Bangladesh with David Williams, who happens to be your partner as well. 2008, Robert Watson, edited Water First, Issues and Challenges for Nations and Communities. There's 2006, Women Miners in Developing Countries, Fit Women and Others. This is again Ashgate, 2006. 2006 again, Fluid Bonds, Views on Gender and Water. So there's always more than one book a year. 2001, Mining and Urbanization in the Raniganj Coal Belt. And in 1990, which is the most interesting book, and I was quite surprised to have learnt of it, and I learnt of it much earlier as well, which is Kuntala's first book, written in 1990, which would give no indication of her specialization. It says, In Search of a Homeland, Anglo-Indians and McCluskey-Ganj, sorry. Minerva Associates Private Limited, and I hope it gets reprinted, yeah? In some ways, I don't know, I should just end on a quip by saying that Kuntala's ideas perhaps, she carries more ideas than the entire Silk Road of the Ganges, in my opinion, yeah? And I should end at that and allow Kuntala to make her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Rohan. I just sound like a working bee or working ant. Been working all my life, I guess, doing what I am supposed to do. Yeah. I have a sore throat, so that's my caveat. If at some point of time my voice gives up and I start coughing, please forgive me. And yes, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here to give a seminar here at the NMML. This is my first visit to NMML, and I hope it is not the last. Just want to say something about geography. My being trained as a geographer, geography in India as a discipline of study has generally been a part of the science faculties in the universities. And however, although I was trained as a geographer, my research has benefited from several other disciplines, particularly environmental history. I not only thank Mahesh Rangarajan for inviting me to give this lecture, but I also note his contributions to the field. And your work, Mahesh, has been one of the sort of pillars in my rethinking my discipline. And of course, Rohan, yours. And there's another person here in the audience, Mr. Ramaswamy Iyer, whose work, when I was I used to teach in Burdwan University, when I was in Burdwan University and doing all this work with NAPM and Medhaji and thinking about water and how to rethink water and his works, his publications that came out in EPW at the time in the late 1990s, they were just told us what to think about, how to think about things. So thank you for being here today. Because it is the custom to give a little bit about the theory of things, and I want to talk about chores here today, but before I do that, let me talk about a little bit about how my disciplinary training encourages me to think about chores. Geography is seen as a positivist spatial science in geography. In India, and it invariably takes up binaries, so two things which are irreducible and absolute, but then the problem is that these two things are attributed with characteristics of good and bad, so opposite characteristics, black and white, and put at a sort of hierarchical level with each other. And geography does exactly that to nature and human society. It looks at nature as the foundation, the basis on which human society is placed, and sort of a binary, an oppositional relationship between the two, and who is influencing the other. There's a lot of debate within geography, traditional geography, about who is influencing the other, whether it's the physical, environment influencing human society, or is it the other way around. So that has created a kind of schizophrenia within geography, and the chasm between geography has become absolutely difficult for us to sort of fill up and move ahead and talk to each other. I mean, the problem in geography is that German geographers, such as Alexander von Humboldt, they also even believed in a causal relationship between the two. The physical environment is everything. That is the cause of the human society. The good thing is that in recent years, geographers have started to challenge the binary of nature and human culture. And to put it very briefly, they're arguing that the one is increasingly indistinguishable from the other. Leslie Head's work, for example, just a recent work published in Australia, looking at urban backyards, and she is talking about how urban backyards are hybrid landscapes. They're not just social constructions of nature, but sort of intimately where nature and culture intermingle. I mean, I look at Delhi's roads. That's what I see as well. So let's think of a little more about hybridity. The term hybridity has a biological source. It comes to us from biologists, but it is still used in contemporary, some contemporary social science in its absolute term, sort of mixed. For example, if Effect Wunigwey, her work is about mixed races, and she's talking about how black and white are sort of mixed. So, in that kind of absolute understanding of hybridity, the question is, are you 60% white, or are you 40% and 40% black, or are you 60% black and 40% white? However, the social scientists like Homi Bhabha, for example, when thinking about hybridity, they think of it differently. Talking about Bhabha's, it came from diasporic identities, Bhabha's imagination about hybridity. And the way Bhabha thinks about hybridity is a third identity. When you mix, say, X and Y together, it doesn't create a X plus Y in certain proportions. It creates a different thing. It creates a Z, which can be sometimes X and which can be sometimes Y. It can be X and Y at some points of time, and it can be neither. And at some points of time, it can be very fluid. So that fluidity of things is something that social scientists have been trying to capture in rethinking environment in contemporary world. There's a lot of research going on in the world about and quite a few abstract uses. For example, Canclini's work in Latin America talks about how culture. We talk about modernity as coming and changing tradition. So we create a binary between tradition and modernity. He's talking about how modernity and tradition are quite intermingled. And you look at individual disciplines, this is happening. People are using it and sort of internalizing. Hybrid economy. Altman's work is about indigenous Australia. And he is showing how indigenous Aboriginal Australians are participating in the market economy. So it's no longer tradition and market economy, and then there is also state, and they're creating a kind of hybrid economy as a result. Gibson Graham's book is not so well known in India. Their work talks about community economies, diverse economies. So they are thinking of hybrid economies, and Skaria's work, I think, is very well known in India, talking about hybrid histories of forests. So he's not looking at the forests as such, but also looking at people and their livelihoods within the forest. A number of geographers have used the idea of hybridity in recent years. Swinjdu, again he looks at urban nature and talks about how within urban context nature and society are quite coupled together. Noel Castry, Karen Becker, their work. But through all this, what we see is a paradigm shift happening, which is taking us away, us geographers, away from the binary divisions into thinking about how nature is not autonomous of human endeavors and human agency, but also quite the conceptualization that of environmental historians of Bruno Latour's work. The tolerance about which I talk in this presentation are hybrid landscapes, in the sense that they do not just defy nature-culture boundaries, but they also put our conventional categorization of land and water. That's a massive category in geography. There's an enormous amount of work on land, and an enormous amount of work on water, just as two separate categories. And we geographers were taught to learn about land-based landforms, land-based activities, land-based shapes. And then there's a whole amount of, fluvial geomorphology, which looks at, rivers and everything that is related to water, but, flowing through channels, as though rivers are carrying only water through their channels. So and I think shores are little islands lying within rivers, but they are massive in a sense. They are massive because they're really very big. They can challenge these, well-established, well-defined categories of land and water as two separate things. They can say, hang on, what is inside there? You put a microscope and look at the river and you see, oh my God, there is not just water, there is silt. And not just silt, there are people. And that is a way of looking at the environment that's absolutely exciting, new. And that older, conventional, traditional ways of looking at geographical training, of looking at nature and environment, just doesn't equip us with. And there is a lot of rethinking of this kind in ecology as well. Ecologists they have always talked about ecological zones, as though this one zone, zone A, which is gray or which is blue, for example, and then there is another zone which is of a different color. I'm thinking of a map because I'm a geographer. This blue and the red and the orange, they're quite separate from each other. Then they started to look at these zones and they realized that really there is not a boundary line or a boundary wall between the two. There's a zone of transition. There's an edge. They called it the edge effect. And they looked at that edge and they started thinking about these are the liminal areas, liminal landscapes, and something else is happening. So I would say that even ecology, which is this sort of mainstream biological derivative, discipline, that is also beginning to look at these sorts of liminal or hybrid landscapes. What chores can do is chores can take us, beyond this land-water dichotomy, and there are people who are thinking about this as well. How its work, for example, is on a very yes, please, thank you. Yeah. Or a bit more water, please, thank you. Yeah. And he worked in a deltaic sort of area in Australia, which gets covered. It doesn't get any rain. It's that area is quite dry. The rain happens elsewhere, but all the water comes and gets accumulated there. It's called Channel Country. And then he talks about there, and Richie, how it looks at that land, and he says, is this land? It's not land, but it's not water either. So he says that land and water are not ontological given, they're not set in concrete. So I will talk about a little bit about, how shores are envisaged for classical geomorphology and how colonial, which is really drawing on Rohan's work on colonial privileging of land, because I'm not an environmental historian. So I just wanted to talk about, the idea of difference in rivers. Social science, if there are two buzzwords, I'm using both the buzzwords, so I just want to be a bit careful. The two buzzwords are hybridity, which I have already, jumped and gone into, and the other one is difference, and I want to talk a little bit about different rivers. Have any of you gone to Europe and looked at their rivers? Rohan, you have. What did you think of the rivers when you went to Europe? When I first went to Europe, I looked at the rivers And I thought, God, this looks like a canal. You know, I come from Bengal. My rivers are big and wide, and they're full of sand and silt. They don't have water at all. You know, by November, December, they'll all dry up. You know, a little bit of a trickle of water, you know, flowing through, meandering through the channel. But then come July, August, they'll get filled up and they'll cause devastation. So this idea that rivers can be different, you know, came to me from my travels actually. You know, but one thing to remember is that tropical rivers also carry sediments. An interesting person, you know, a geomorphologist actually, Abhijit Gupta. He was, you know, half-time in National University of Singapore. He's really very rooted in Southeast Asian studies. But also, I think he speaks a language of geomorphology. So, but I call him the Foucault in geography, geomorphology. You know, Michel Foucault in geomorphology, because he was the first person. He said, "Come on, hang on. Our rivers are quite different, you know, and than these temperate rivers." So he started talking about tropical rivers as a category, you know, although he talks of them as a category because he speaks that geomorphological language. He's really, I think he brought to notice a lot of things that conventional geomorphologists never looked at, never thought about. And he showed that, look at tropical rivers, they never flow in a bank-full condition, they're seasonal. You know, like I just described, you know, very seasonal, and they do not only carry water but also sediments. And in thinking about then rivers carrying also sediments, we need to again come back to geography and think of scale as well. You know, you think of Bengal, the whole of Bengal is a product of rivers. We talk of riverine Bengal, Bengal being a riverine place. Oops, I forgot to bring the book that I meant to quote from. I was, because I'm not a historian, I depend on secondary sources, reading William Van Schendel's Three Deltas, and in which he is quoting Orme, French traveler in Bengal, you know, pre-colonial Bengal, and Orme is describing Bengal that this is an extremely rich economy. It's full of rivers. There is hardly, everybody is an artisan here, and there is hardly any such thing as a farmer. He's saying that in Bengal there is hardly any such thing as a farmer. So it's a water-based economy he's describing and it's quoted in Schendel's book. You look at that scale, and then you go down, you know, you look at Sundarbans, about which Amitav Ghosh has written so beautifully. And do you remember in Hungry Tide, Amitav Ghosh's book, the American student who comes to Sundarbans to study these turtles, she falls from the boat into the river, and then she thinks that I'm an expert swimmer, I have been in water so many times, but this is a different water. I can't see anything. And in his beautiful, I can't express it so beautifully, in his beautiful language, Ghosh is saying that there was a curtain of silt in front of her eyes. And the guy who was saving the fisherman, he was just next to her, but she couldn't see him because of that curtain of silt. So that Sundarbans is another, you know, you come down in the scale and you see Sundarbans as a hybrid, you know, landscape. And then you go to the micro scale, absolutely smallest, and then you see the chores as metaphors, not just, you know, real. I mean, they are real, but also a kind of metaphors of the hybrid economy. I just wanted to give you an image grab from Google, because everybody does it, and I'm a geographer, I must show some maps to give you an idea of Bengal Delta, the broader region of which I'm talking about in today's presentation. So this region is described by geomorphologists as the Bengal Basin, which is surrounded by old and young mountains on all three sides. The Chotanagpur Plateau is on the west, the Himalayas is on the north and east, and the region is completely monsoonal, which means it receives all its rainfall, which is around 1.5 meters, during the 3 rainy months of July, August, September. The entire area is a deltaic flat, which is not much over 7 to 10 meters above the sea level, and created by the alluvium that was brought by the rivers that outlet into the Bay of Bengal. Now, Bay of Bengal, it is important to remember, is a tidal area. That means the rivers that are outletting into the sea can outlet into the sea only for about half the time. So they can outlet into the sea only for 12 hours of the day. Rest of the time, actually the seawater is coming into Bay of Bengal. So the rivers have very limited capacity of outletting the water and the sediments. And so when you intervene in this, this geographical setting, if you are not aware of this critical ecological factor, then you're going to mess very badly with this. And we will come back to this in a minute. So just coming back to different rivers, that if we accept that rivers can be as different from each other as individuals, then the other area that we might want to explore is the binary division between land and waters, here in this, remembering. So shorelands are just low-lying sandy pieces of land rising from shallow river beds throughout the flat Gangetic plains. But they are more numerous in the lower reaches. These lands are integral part of the river channels. One can say that they are river islands formed of sandy alluvium. So I have used the word Chor Bhumi because I'm a Bengali. In Bangla we call it Chor Bhumi, and that's why sometimes when I translate I say Chor land. Actually, I really want to complicate the idea of chors as land. If you travel around North Bihar, you would find many such lands, and they are called Diara lands. If you go to lower valleys lower reaches of the Indus River, you would find similar lands. They are called bait lands. And these are not wetlands. It's important to remember that chors are not wetlands. They are not covered in Ramsar Convention. and these are sort of result of rivers with very high silt levels slowing down for some reason or the other, and we will come to that in a minute, as the rivers flow across the plains. As I was trying to come back to that, geomorphologists describe the chors as sandbars. It's not that they haven't noted the existence of chors at all. They have. They call it sandbars. Geomorphologists describe the floodplains as banks. So as though the river is carrying a bag of money, which is the silt, and depositing it in the flood, on the floodplains, like we put money in the banks. So they have various names on, about attached bars. When the bar is attached to the banks, they have a middle bar, which is in the middle. And generally, for channels that have, they use the word braided. Sort of as though the hair has been intricately braided. They use the term braided channel for expressing the meandering channels. The banks are wide, but the water is a trickle, which is sort of moving from one end of the river bank to another. So they use this sort of channel. So how do we explain the existence of chors? This is a very simplified diagram. There are two ways of thinking about the origin of the chore. So I can think of chore based on what I have said just now as purely a product of ecology of the delta. The chores are bringing these silt, which is their money, and depositing it in the bank. That floodplain, that deltaic floodplain, is the bank where they are putting in the silt. So their rivers are coming down from the hills, the diagram that is on the top, so it can't be seen properly, and depositing in. As soon as they are slowing down, because of the change in the slope of the land, the rivers are slowing down and depositing. The change in velocity of the river, and it happens with us. I came yesterday to Delhi. I had a light bag on my shoulder. I had a big suitcase in my hand, and I was carrying a backpack. So when I got tired, I put down the suitcase first. That was the heaviest. Then I got a bit tired more. So what I did is I took off my backpack and put it down. And then I got more tired, so I put down my handbag. So this is what the rivers do. They put down the coarser sediments first, the heavier and the coarser sediments first, and then they put down the finer sediments. And the finer sediments, they try to take it out with the river into the sea and deposit in the river, sea, delta mouth. The other way of thinking about chores is that chores are a product of human intervention. So you construct a dam in a river, and that is how you can think of chores in Damodar, which I have studied, and I'll explain that. You construct a dam which traps the sediment behind the dam. But when during these 3 months of monsoon rain, when there is excessive amount of rain, what you do is to save the barrage, the reservoir and the dam walls, you lift the sluices a little bit. When you lift the sluices a little bit, the heavier, coarser sediments that are, in the bottom, they escape into the river and they exacerbate or enhance the formation of chores. So one can say, a bit of both has happened in case of in Bengal. But then one can also think of chores as products of history. And who else but Rohan D'Souza has said about, talked about all this. You can look at chores as products of historical ways, changes in the ways people manage land and water. In Bengal, there's a lot of, I think there are hundreds of books looking at the impact of permanent settlement on Bengal land revenues and the society and economy. In fact, my father's PhD was also on the Sabine feudation that took place after permanent settlement. But one thing that we haven't still understood quite clearly, and which will be the task of some other environmental historian, is to look at the ecological impacts of permanent settlement. Because within 100 years of permanent settlement, Bengal, which was this highly productive, artisan-based, I was talking about that description, the artisan-based, prosperous economy, into a waterlogged, mosquito-infested, malarial economy, eventually which caused this famous Burdwan fever, and if you look at census data of Indian population, in 1921, there was a big dip because of Burdwan fever. It came from Bengal, Burdwan, which is my study area. So, no land settlement actually accompanied the permanent settlement. British talk about the rules of usage not being known. So they really didn't know how land and waters were used. The British rulers coming into Bengal looked at the rivers and they, goodness, these terrible rivers, how do we control them? They shift, they are not stable, they go from one place to another. How do we go? The first thing was to stabilize the river. First, and as Rohan has written so beautifully, they started building embankments along the rivers. So what the embankments did is to contain the sediments within the rivers and exacerbate the formation of chores as well. And there's a lot of of this in my book about the creation of a category of wasteland, because the idea was to generate revenue from the land, and at the same time these new lands were coming onto the riverbed, which they didn't know how to define or categorize. So they created a sort of category, say this is wasteland, and who will manage this land? The local zamindars. And the local zamindars, they say, okay, this is good because we don't have to pay the revenue on, a share of the revenue that we get on the wasteland. So they started to settle people on these lands. And this is precisely what happened in my study area in Burdwan. But overall in Bengal, very soon, by 1825, colonial British rulers started to realize that something has gone wrong. Something has gone wrong. Something wasn't right. So they came out with another act, and that is called Bengal Alluvion and Diluvian Act. And chores are often called BADA, Bengal Alluvion and Diluvian Act. That's the acronym, BADA. And you go to Bangladesh, for example, there's a chor Bada Jumi. Bada Jumi. In Sundarban, they call it Bada Jumi. So land that was, Bada, basically recovered, is recognized as Bada. What was Bada, Bengal? It recognizes the existence of chores. But two kinds, again, classifies them. It says, okay, chores can be in situ or new accretions. Okay, so in situ or new accretions. And who owns that land? That is the main problem, okay? Who owns that land? Who will pay the rent and who will own the land when the new chore emerges? Bada says that, all right, when there is diluvian, okay, diluvian is submergence, underwater. When there is diluvian, if you are the owner, if the owner continues to pay rent of that land until a new chore emerges, that person will get the rightful ownership. Now that's very difficult for a poor farmer to do. So obviously it's a very pro-land, big landowner, thing. Gradually, chores became so, important in whole of Bengal that other water bodies in Bengal, Bengal by that time of Bengal Tenancy Act in 1885 had become quite a moribund land of moribund rivers and waterlogged everywhere, and you have this, large number of words. Have you heard of haors? Haors are the low-lying land between two rivers. If you are from North India, Gangetic Plains, you would think of Doab. Doab is the higher land between two rivers. But in Bengal, it's the land that is low-lying land between two rivers. That's haor. But it can be also baur. Baurs are, left-out channels like Oxbow Lakes that have been left by rivers, and when the rivers have moved to another channel. The haors, baurs, beels, khals, and all that, it's innumerable words that describe them. But chores remained as wetlands. So, yeah. Anyway, Bengal Tenancy Act made a bit, tried to make it a bit more clear that a chore will be recorded as land only if it had a uninterrupted existence for 20 years. So, without going underwater, without being diluviated. As a result, chores are always changing, and I will describe that they are subject to two forces. They are subject to not just accretion, they are also subject to erosion. They are always changing, and so it's very difficult to find a chore that has remained undisturbed in its intact form for 20 years. So very few chores actually get recorded in land as land. But that has changed since the construction of the dams, and chores have become more permanent since 1960s. So just wanted to give you a view of this chore. This chore this is in Bangladesh, Podda chore. I was talking about chores being subject to two kinds of forces, right? And if you look at Bengali language, there's an intricate set of words. What kind of riverbank erosion? You would think that riverbank erosion is the same. Riverbank erosion can be bhanga. Bhanga is breaking. It can be gradually eroded. It can be chapa bhanga. Chapa bhanga is something just slides downwards. That's chapa bhanga. But then there is also hariya bhanga. Hariya bhanga is, have you ever seen an earthen pot, and if you put it on the ground with a bit of harshness, the bottom breaks? So when the part of the chore gets undermined and then the top slides and breaks, that is hariya bhanga. And then there is nishi bhanga. When the erosion happens at night, it's nishi bhanga. And chetra bhanga. Chetra bhanga is when the flood waters are receding, it's pulling away, chetring, literally pulling away a little bit of the chore, the sediments from the newly emerged chores. So all these words, as these, showed the great understanding that people who live on chores had of chores, as compared to the intricate, detailed land classification that came into existence in post-permanent settlement Bengal. I'll just talk a little bit about our research. Both my co-author in the book, Gopa Samanta, and myself, we did research, our PhD research in this area, but not on chores. At that time, we didn't think of chores. Really, we were blind to the chores. It took us a long time to understand the part of the rivers. I think that's kind of the rethinking that came to my, our both of us in a way. We started doing the research really since 2001, using, initially we would go, it was very difficult to access the chores. Chores you can access a chore only after crossing a little bit of water, and there's no road. You just have to walk. So sometimes 5-6 kilometers of walk. We used to go and sit in these villages initially, and then started making friends, and someone would stop and talk to us, and we would have a conversation, and gradually we built up friendships, which led to interviews, and then we had focus group discussions. But we also used local students and local people to make full census of 11 chore lands, 11 chores in Lower Damodar Valley, which is in between Burdwan district and Bankura district. And we did a lot of stuff, very intricate details. We went to the household, looked at the financial diaries, how do you spend money and all that sort of thing. We encouraged the local artists and photographers to join us in recording, this. So I will show you some of that in a minute. This is what a geographer would call a braided channel. Look at the amount of sand on that riverbed, and these white areas would be the chores, and the channel is sort of meandering through between these banks. This is a painting done by a local artist, just a watercolor. We encourage all that, with these people. And if you lived within the two embankments of the river, Bhitor in Bangla means inside, Bahir is outside. And again, a little bit of a binary here. And how would you think of yourself that you live inside the chore? You live inside the river. The chore people, who are called Chodua, in Bangladesh they are called Choura. In West Bengal they are called Chodua. Choruas, they say, just the opposite, they say, we live outside. We are the outsiders. We live outside the embankment. So that for them, bhitore lok, the insiders are people who live, across the embankment. So in our, book, we use the word mainland shore land, but it would be silly to think that there is no interaction. These people don't interact with the mainland people. There is a lot of interaction. So this is a picture of an embankment. It's rather low here, but they can be really high. And all the area that is on the left-hand side of these women, who are going, whose back you're seeing, that is actually part of the river. The embankment is, sort of going round that area. So as you can imagine, the newly formed shores are quite transitory and fragile, and the shapes change quite frequently, and an entire shore can disappear overnight. Even just before we really did the survey, the census, one shore completely disappeared. We just couldn't do the survey there. But then they can be very, long-lasting. The biggest river island, biggest shore actually in the world is Majuli, as we know, everyone knows. And that has been in existence for 250 years or so at the moment. But then there are people who say that Majuli may not be a shore actually. Majuli may be the relic of land that the river just, bifurcated there and left in the middle. We just don't know the origin. So, if you look at shores, as define this land-water, boundary, you would think of shores as posing an epistemological problem to our conventional understanding of the environment. And you would realize that the shores are not easily amenable to the rigid ways that we view land and water as two distinct categories, and they are more like the zones of ecological transition, or a kind of borderland between two different ecosystems. And to understand such hybrid lands, you really can't use the conventional, sort of disciplinary-based training. I'm a geographer, I'm going to study shores, or I'm an environmental historian. And I think that my location in an interdisciplinary department was really helpful for me, and going through the work of environmental historians like Andy Souza was really illuminating for my understanding of shores. So one would, a question would arise. I can see that question coming in everybody's head. How many people actually live on the shores in Bengal? If answer would be very large number of people. We just don't know. United Nations made an approximate guesstimate. An approximate guesstimate of Bangladesh was 3 million in 1995. But I really don't know how they came to that number. If you think of the shorelands in northern India, Gangetic Plains, North Bihar, West Bengal, or just, the entire Bengal Delta, the number would be a lot more than just 3 million people. One needs to remember here that this population that we are talking about, this 3 million in Bangladesh, that's a floating population, literally. Floating in the sense that some people just come on the shores, they cultivate the land and go back, they live on the mainland, or some people live on the mainland. It's very difficult to understand and accurately. Bangladesh, even today, is marked, Bangladeshi shores are marked by violent feuds, violent fights. When a shore rises, everybody, all local landlords, all local political leaders, they are looking at that shore to grab that land. And this has been narrated in lots and lots of Bengali fiction, Podda Parer Vrittanto, Tita Shekti Nodin Nam, Chor Kashem, Amarendra Das's book. These books are full of this descriptions of this land and water mixed livelihoods, and I can't help but quote one, and in one place the Tita Shekti Nodin Nam, Advaita Molla Bormon, he's the son of a fisherman, Mallo community, lower caste, and he's saying that here, he's so describing the livelihood of Chor community, and he's saying here in one corner of their house you would see the fishing nets, and in the other corner you would see the plow, and they coexist, because they look at the sky and think, okay, when is the rain coming? And when the rain comes, they'll go and plant the seed. And when there is no rain, they'll go to the water and river and start fishing. So there's a lot of this, and it is unusual. It strikes me as strange, and it strikes me as very interesting that the extent of invisibility of chores in disciplinary studies, of that really looks at rivers as rivers only, carriers of water, and just water, no people, no sediments and all that. So the extent of neglect that chores have experienced. So how do the people who have studied Bangladeshi chores, Abdul Baki is one of them, and who really looks at establishment, peopling of chores. He talks about chores as land of Allah Jane. Land of Allah Jane, God only knows. Allah Jane, God only knows. And because everything can happen, as I was talking about that. And the people who live on the chores, and he talks about them as the wretched of the earth. And the most risk-taking people in the world. They can take risks. They can, and if you read Humayun Kabir's Nodi or Nari, rivers and women, and he talks about this, how, this community goes into a new chore land and establishes themselves, their rights on that. So some of the most desperate people in the country is how they describe this, people who are living and using the fluid landscapes of, land, water, frontier, in a way, and that represents a transitory nature which is suitable for transient settlers. And in West Bengal, transient settlers that are also seen as illegal immigrants into West Bengal from Bangladesh or other parts of the country. Here you're looking at Saraju Mahato. He came from Bihar. Northern Bihar had a river-borne trade going from North Bihar to north of Bengal. After partition, that river-borne trade got cut off. So he said, we are Majhi Malla log. We are Hum log Majhi Malla log. And so we were looking for a watery place to live. So we came to the chores to live, because they were familiar with the water, riverine environment, and make a livelihood from fishing. Before these people started to come in, the Maharaja of Burdwan, of course, using that idea of wasteland, he started to settle some of the more permanent, particularly the attached chores in Burdwan, and he settled his own sentries and fights in these lands. But Biharis came and took over in 1950s these chore lands. But most surprisingly, from 1960s onwards, Bangladeshi Hindus started to trickle in. And why Bangladeshi Hindus started to trickle in, that's another story. I'll just avoid the story of partition and what kind of Hindus. It's all in the book. Lower caste Hindus. Upper Bengal has been divided before. So when Bengal was divided in 1947, there wasn't a population exchange like it happened in the western frontier. People started to trickle back into across the border after 1950-51, when they said, "Oh my God, this is really a different country." And many upper caste people came and settled in Calcutta with their relatives' homes and all that. Lower caste got stuck in rural areas of Bangladesh where they started to experience religious persecution. And every, anti-Muslim outburst in India had a repercussion on anti-Hindu repercussion on the grounds, on the rural areas in Bangladesh, and resulting in a tremendous insecurity amongst the Bangladeshi Hindus. As such, there is a lot said about Bangladeshis as the quintessential migrants. You would find many Bangladeshi middle class person, just applies for immigration to Canada, takes up a Canadian citizen. He holds a job in Bangladesh and never goes, or maybe goes every now and then. And some other also talks about Bangladeshis as ecological refugees. This whole waterlogging problem and flooding problem is also causing a lot of migration. But religious persecution is really behind the Bangladeshi Hindus coming into Chor land. So I'll just, try to end here, gradually wind up. Chores are changing. We are also not static. Post-DVC dam construction, chores have become more stable. They have become more in number and come into attention of people like us increasingly. And I don't know how to say it here. See, interestingly, I talked about two communities coming into the chores. Chores are changing, and how are chores changing is because the river's flow is changing. River has less and less water. I'll finish very soon. And river. So the Biharis, who were more familiar with this riverine environment, are withdrawing from chores. They're leaving. They're going to Calcutta to become a puller rickshaw in a city of your style. But the Bangladeshis, they told us that we know how to make a land yield. We know how to clear a land. They have this confidence as farmers, and they have really made chores into villages and yielding lands, very sandy soil. So what do they? And when the rest of Bengal is flourishing, monsoon everywhere, green everywhere, people are planting rice. That's a bad season for the chor dwellers. Choruas just say, okay, this is the lean season for us. And then the monsoon finishes, winter comes, and then they start cultivating potatoes, rice, and all, depending on the land. And this they can do because of a tremendous understanding of how to dance with the river, how to understand the river. And this is a geographical question that I come to. It's not new. In 1960s, in Chicago University, Cates, he wrote a book he asked a question actually, that why do people live on floodplains? There's so many insecurities, vulnerabilities. There's the chance of flood anytime, washing away your years of your work. So why do people live on floods? So today, in 2013, we are asking the same questions. So I think we are looking at the answer differently, not just, because Cates was a behavioral scientist. People weigh their, benefits, and as a community, they weigh their benefits and risks and come to a rational decision. And we're saying, hang on, that's not the case. They understand the river, they understand the river's mood, and they redefine. It's not bounded rationality they're following, but they redefine our understanding of rivers, our understanding of how rivers behave and what. And not only that, when we look at the way people live on shores, we understand the way we have explained very popular concepts like vulnerability are quite complicated, quite problematic. We read probably chor dwellers' livelihoods tell us that you have to redefine your understanding of vulnerability. You have to redefine what you mean by adaptation. You talk about adaptation. Shore dwellers look at this changing environment. They live in an environment that's changing continuously, and they adjust. They told me that we adjust. We can't say that we like it, but we adjust, continuously changing. So it's like really a dance, and when the river retreats a little bit, they advance a little bit. When the river advances, they step back a little bit. So they say that we will not leave the river. We will always, go with the river. And this guy actually told me, he is on the cover of my book and say that we are like a drifting grain of sand, here today, there tomorrow, but always with the river's flow. And that's where I end, I think. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kuntala. Sorry we had to end, but again.